G'day everyone, today I'm going to tell you all about the different terrain and weather effects in Hearthstone 4 and how they affect your units. I'm going to be doing so using a bunch of footage that I took way back in 2023 when I went to Nepal to do the Annapurna circuit trek, and honestly, the footage has just sat in my archives and I've forgotten about it. So better late than never, and I hope it's helpful. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this and you find it helpful, and also stick around to the end of the video to hear from today's sponsor, Ground News. The map in Hearthstone 4 is covered in individual provinces or tiles which your units will fight. As you likely know if you've watched my army guide video, the amount of divisions which can participate in a battle depends on the combat width of a province where the battle is taking place, and that is affected by the type of terrain in that province. There are 8 different types of terrain in the game, all with different combat widths, and they all have unique buffs or debuffs which affect your divisions. Composition of your divisions also matters, with certain unit types like tanks or armored vehicles suffering worse penalties in certain terrains, while other units like your special forces will actually get huge bonuses to their specific terrain types. Your engineer and recon support companies also provide a huge range of buffs to your divisions, mainly relating to defense and movement. You can see any terrain modifiers affecting your divisions in the division designer in the bottom right, and this updates as you make changes, so you can see what will make or break your divisions as you're creating them. When looking at the map, you can see the terrain type of a selected tile in the bottom left. The tooltip will show you what modifiers it applies, the combat width, and the attack penalty, which for your ease, I'll put a whole list on screen now for you to screenshot. This is relatively easy to follow, but all the other modifiers are less so, and they will be the focus of the rest of the video, so you know what you're up against in each terrain. In addition to that, there are also a variety of weather effects which provide a range of different penalties, and we'll cover all these off too, so let's get started with the clips I took in Nepal.
G'day everyone, I've hiked 5,500 metres up the Annapurna mountain range to talk to you about negative weather effects in Hoi 4. Today we're talking about snow.
Snow only takes place in areas where it's cold, typically in the winter or in mountainous areas. It only really also takes place above or below the equator, so around the center of the map, so be mindful of that. And it's also going to be different in the northern hemisphere as opposed to the southern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere, winter is from December to February, but in the southern hemisphere, it takes place from June to August. Also, the only place that you're really ever going to get snow in the southern hemisphere is maybe down the very bottom of South America. Snow is a state level modifier, so if you find it in one province, you'll find it in every province in that state, and it incurs a minus 20% division speed penalty, plus 10 org loss while moving, 25% attrition, minus 5 org regain, minus 55% entrenchment speed, minus 40% division attack, minus 45% breakthrough, minus 25% attacking division speed, minus 35% supply efficiency, and plus 15% supply truck attrition. They are some significant penalties. They also stack with other effects such as snowing, which is generally going to be taking place at the same time as you have snow, as well as either the very cold or extremely cold effects too. Ergo, never attack in winter if you can help it.
G'day everyone, I hiked 5,500 metres up the Annapurna mountain range to talk to you about terrain bonuses in Hearthstone 4, and today we're talking about mountains.
Mountains are one of the hardest terrains to fight in, and after being in the Annapurna range, I can absolutely see why. Mountain terrains have a combat width of 50 with a reinforced width of 25, so think about that when you're designing your divisions. Divisions will suffer 30% extra attrition, enemy air support is reduced by 10%, your supply truck attrition is increased by 100%, so it's doubled, and then there is a supply flow reduction of 12%, and then movement in mountains are twice as difficult. Depending on the part of the map that the mountain is in or the weather there, if it's also very cold, it can suffer additional penalties such as 25%, minus 30, minus 10%, as you see at the bottom here from the very cold effect. Provinces such as this one, which is not very cold, does not suffer that penalty. If you can avoid fighting in mountains if at all possible, definitely do so. Otherwise, if you have to, make sure you're using your mountaineer special forces as opposed to tanks or normal infantry.
G'day everyone, I've hiked through the Annapurna Valley to talk to you about terrain bonuses in Hearthstone 4, and today we're talking about forests.
Forests are a relatively straightforward type of terrain to fight through. They're kind of on the same side of the scale as plains tiles are. They have a combat width of 60 with an additional attack of 30. Enemy air support's reduced by 10%. There is a 20% penalty to supply truck attrition and a supply flow reduction of 8%. And movement through these terrains costs 1.5 times what it normally would, as opposed to, say, planes, for example.
G'day everyone, I've hiked all the way up the Annapurna Pass to talk to you guys about terrain bonuses in Hearts of Iron 4, and today we're talking about hills.
Hills are usually found right next to mountains, but are nowhere near as bad to fight in. They have a combat width of 70 with additional attack of 35. They reduce enemy air support by 5%. They do incur 20% supply truck attrition and decrease your supply by 10% and have a 1.5 movement penalty. However, aside from that, there are really no other penalties. Medium and heavy tanks do suffer slight penalties to their attack in these terrains, but on the other hand, your mountaineers are significantly more effective.
G'day everyone, I've hiked all the way up into the Nepalese mountain ranges to talk to you about terrain bonuses in Hearts of Iron 4, and today we're talking about deserts.
Deserts are also pretty difficult to fight in, not as bad as some other terrains, but they can be challenging. They have a combat width of 70, additional attack width of 35. Divisions suffer a 15% attrition penalty. Your generals have a double chance to get sick, like 100% extra chance to get sick. Your supply truck attrition is increased by 50%. Your supply flow is reduced by 14%. And the movement penalty is 1.05 times what it normally would be. So not significantly worse, but still a little bit. Big thing about deserts though, is they are often accompanied by the very hot penalty or the extremely cold penalty, which will also stack on. So again, be aware of it.
G'day everyone, I hiked all the way up into the Annapurna mountain ranges in Nepal to talk to you about terrain bonuses in Hearts of Iron 4, and today we're talking about marshes. Yes, this is the best I can get.
Marshes are one of the worst terrains to get stuck in. They feature very heavily in this section of the map on the eastern front. So if you're looking at Barbarossa, then you want to be mindful of trying to attack around this area. And also up in the north, there's some pretty large marsh areas. Marshes have a combat width of 50 with an additional attack of 25. Divisions suffer 35% attrition. Your generals have a plus 100% chance to get sick. Your supply truck attrition is plus 400%. That's right, 400%. Your supply flow is reduced by 16% and your movement cost is doubled. Again, these are often paired with either snow or mud or any other sort of weather effects. So be very mindful of the weather and the time of year, especially if you're trying to attack in these areas. Marines actually negate some of the penalty when you're attacking in marshes. So if you do have to attack, consider using Marines, especially those paired with engineers. Hello, me again. You may have noticed that I've missed a few, and also that I'm back here in Australia, not freezing my ass off on the side of a mountain somewhere. That's because I either forgot to record, or I didn't go to those terrains or experience that weather, or the audio quality was so terrible I didn't want to do that to you. So I'm going to quickly go through the rest of them now from the comfort of my air-conditioned, climate-controlled room, and I hope this is still helpful and exciting for you. Also, if you enjoy this or you find it helpful, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel so you can see more. It really helps me out. And also let me know in the comments what your favorite weather is. Maybe just let me know if you have any crazy weather stories, especially you guys that live in places where it actually snows. Don't really get that here. Jungles, the tropical forests. These feature quite heavily along the equator part of the map, so you're looking at a lot of South America, Central America, the middle part of Africa, and in Southeast Asia, or I guess the Asian theater in general. Jungles have a combat width of 60 with an additional attack of 30. Divisions suffer 20% attrition, minus 25% to enemy air support. Your generals again are gonna get sick. There is a 300% supply truck attrition penalty, and the supply flow reduction penalty is 16%, and there is a 1.5 times movement penalty in these terrains. Again, often you will have the extremely hot weather effect paired with the jungle terrains, so be mindful of that. Again, if you can avoid them, do so. Otherwise, you just kind of have to accept you're going to have a lot of attrition, especially with your supplies. Urban tiles are typically going to be any of your major cities around the world, and the capital victory points for a lot of your big nations. They have a combat width of 80 with additional attacks of 40. Enemy air support's reduced by 50%. Supply flow reduction is minus 20%. And there is a 1.2 times movement penalty moving through these terrains. Urban tiles themselves aren't significantly bad. However, a lot of different division types do take significant penalties when they're fighting in these terrains, particularly looking at your tank divisions. Plains feature heavily all across the map for the most part, especially in Western Europe, where historically that famous run around the Maginot Line happened. They are essentially the default terrain type. There's no penalties or buffs to these sorts of terrains. They have a combat width of 70 with an additional attack of 35, no supply flow reduction, normal movement. This is essentially the bar for what all your other terrains are compared to. If you are attacking, you always want to be planning your offensives through plains tiles. They are the easiest ones to push through and the hardest to defend. Now we come to the majority of the rest of the weather effects. We have snowing up first, has minus 15% air detection, minus 10% air mission efficiency, minus 30% naval strike, naval hit chance, naval speed is reduced by 5%, naval detection reduced by 15%, 10% org loss while moving penalty, fleets can retreat 5% faster, air accidents are 10% more likely, minus 10% to positioning, and then your supply efficiency is reduced by 10% and supply truck attrition increased by 30%. Snowing is often paired with the snow weather effect, making these doubly bad. Again, if you are in the winter period in your theater of war, make sure you're checking the provinces where you will be attacking. If there's snow, if it's snowing, you are going to suffer huge penalties, as well as it being very cold, which is just going to make your life so much harder. In certain parts of the map, the snow is so severe that it is even worse than those horrific penalties we went through before. Deep snow will give you minus 50% division speed, 25% org loss while moving, 25% winter attrition, minus 10% org regain, minus 45% entrenchment, minus 60% division attack, minus 60% breakthrough, minus 50% attacking division speed, reducing your supply efficiency by 55%, and your supply truck attrition increased by 200%. If you see this, do not attack. I can't be any more clear about this. Just stop. Deep snow is often accompanied by a blizzard as a negative weather effect. The penalties here are so extreme, it's almost pointless me going through it. Again, if you see these weather effects, stop. Very cold is the lower tier of the cold weather effects. It still will increase your attrition by 25%, reduces your entrenchment speed by 30%, and reduces your attack by 10% and breakthrough by 15%. You can fight through this if that's the only negative effect and you're attacking through like plains or forests or something. The really bad one is extremely cold, which nets you 25% attrition, minus 5% org regain, minus 60% entrenchment speed, minus 20% attack, 30% breakthrough, 15% supply efficiency, and 100% supply truck attrition. This is really going to be the one that will start costing you, and they can change relatively quickly too if the weather is worsening, so be mindful of that. Rain is also quite common, and again, it's something that you can fight through. You don't have to give it a whole lot of attention. It will reduce your air detection by 10% and your mission efficiency by 10%. Also, your naval strike mission will be reduced by 10%. Your hit chance and speed will be reduced by 5% with your navy, and detection reduced by 10%. 5% increase to your org loss while moving, fleets retreat faster under bad weather, so that's good, but your air accidents are increased by 10% and org regain is reduced by 5, so not super bad. Again, you can deal with it. Yeah, it's sandstorms. These are pretty significant, so if you do have this taking place, definitely hole up and just try to let it pass. Reduces your air detection by 90%. Planes should not fly in this weather. Your ground bombing targeting reduced by 100% will not work. Air mission efficiency reduced by 50%. Naval strike reduced by 90%. Org loss while moving plus 25%. Air accidents increased by 60%. Your org regain is reduced by 20%. And then your supply efficiency decreased by 15%. And your supply truck attrition increased by 300%. Especially if you're low on trucks, just give it a hot minute. And if you're relying on your Air Force, just wait for a bit. Mud. Anyone who is a fan of history, or interested in learning history, I should say, will know that mud is very, very bad for armies, and that is reflected in the game. Your division speed is reduced by 50%, org loss increased by 25%, your attrition is increased by 70%, your division attack is reduced by 40%, and then your supply efficiency is reduced, and supply truck attrition increased by 500%. This is extremely common along the Eastern Front. So again, Germany doing Barbarossa, it is a combination of mud, deep snow, heavy, like the snowfall, the storms, the extreme cold temperatures, all of that stuff will reduce even your best division's attack down to nothing. Mud will form in areas where there's been a lot of storms or melting snow. It's really common just after winter. So again, once it does pass, just keep a little eye out, see what's around before you start attacking. Heat, very hot. Again, not the worst of the heat weather effects. It gives you 10% heat attrition, minus 5% reorganization gain, and supply efficiency. Again, extremely common around the equatorial region of the world and deserts. So again, those negative effects all compact individually on their own. Again, doesn't seem too bad, but when you pair that with the negative effects from a desert, it can get bad. Speaking of which, extremely hot is the worst one, and that is pretty bad. So 20% heat attrition, 50% supply consumption increase, minus 10% augury gain, minus 10% attack, 10% supply truck attrition. So again, pairing that with the desert, if you get a sandstorm, you're pretty much cooked. Now, I haven't really touched on the naval terrains, but there are a few different ones. You've got your standard oceans, you've got deep oceans, then you've also got, there's coastal, shallow seas, there we go. And then you'll also have a fjords and, here we go, fjords section. So these all have different penalties and things like that. However, with the navies, it's a bit less relevant because, you kind of need to operate in areas, where you need to operate. With your submarines, though, it is worth noting that they do much better in deep oceans as opposed to your fjords and stuff like that. So if you are putting your submarines out, they get a reduction to their visibility in the deep oceans. So keep an eye out where they are. They're good areas for them to be active in. A couple of naval weather effects though. Your Arctic waters take place kind of around the Barents Sea, or I think even up here somewhere they can appear occasionally. You've got Arctic water, minus 5% fleet speed while retreating, an extra 20% casualties on sinking, 10% attrition, and minus 20% positioning. Then the other one to be aware of is shark-infested waters, which is really common in Asia for some reason, especially around Indonesia and off the coast of Australia. I know, right? Really debasing ourselves in stereotype paradox. Shark-infested waters increase your casualties on sink by 60%. So when your ships are lost at sea, you typically get a bit of that manpower back. Not around here. Obviously, all of these different terrains and weather effects are situated all across the world. And do you know where you can learn all about the world? That's right, with today's sponsor, Ground News. Ground News makes it easy to compare news articles from all around the world, helping you spot media bias through analysis and direct comparison. It helps you cut through clickbait and sensationalized content by providing a variety of sources for each story, empowering you to compare multiple perspectives to see what details are emphasized, exaggerated, or left out entirely by each side of the political spectrum. Ground News also utilizes third-party fact checkers to rate the factuality of sources too, helping you to avoid misinformation. When looking at the homepage on the website or in the app, you'll see a variety of news stories to choose from. When you select one, Ground News collates all the articles reporting on that story, showcasing each organization's political bias, whether they be left-leaning, center, or right-leaning, as well as their factuality and ownership, so you can be more informed about the sources that you consume news from. I've been using Ground News for a few months now, and I've genuinely found it to be a really useful tool. Especially when checking international sources I'm not as familiar with, Ground News shows me how factual they are, as well as any potential bias, so I can be aware of that when reading. I also like the blind spot feature, which shows news stories which have a political undertone and are disproportionately reported on by one side of the political spectrum. It's helpful to not only see stories I might have otherwise missed, but also to compare what events are being focused on and omitted from each side. If you would like to have access to this amazing tool, Ground News have a fantastic offer of 40% off their Vantage plan if you sign up using my code linked in the description or the QR code up on screen now. It would also really help out my channel, so two birds, one rolled up newspaper. Using my link also gives you access to the Ground News app, which I've been using every morning to check the news as I have my coffee. So if you'd like to be more informed like me and support the channel, please consider signing up using the link below.